they are losing is the pro-life Democrats and moderates who feel very uncomfortable with this extreme position by the Democratic Party to promote abortion.
The abortion debate continues on Capitol Hill. A look at an alternative plan moderates say could be a compromise legislative position. A rare bipartisan pro-life stance. In one state legislature, every single female senator, both Democrat and Republican, opposes abortion and is sponsoring legislation to ban it. An in-depth conversation ahead. Coming to Lourdes, France to renew the soul. A look inside a program of prayer, formation, and fellowship for military members from around the globe.
I'm Alan Holdren, and I'm here at Kansas State University, where a former wide receiver is headed to the Catholic seminary. That story ahead.
From catching Hail Marys to praying them, EWTN News In Depth starts now.
The bottom line is that this is a winning issue, and so we hope that the pro-life members in Congress see that and really seize the opportunity to protect life.
The tug of war continues as pro-life and pro-abortion lawmakers on both the federal and state levels jockey for votes to pass abortion laws that reflect their views. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. Late this week, an important development at the state level. Oklahoma lawmakers passed a bill on Thursday prohibiting nearly all abortions starting at fertilization, making it the strictest pro-life law in the country. Modeled after a Texas law, it relies on private citizens to enforce it. Oklahoma is just one of many states writing laws to severely restrict or ban abortion in anticipation of a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court likely to overturn Roe v. Wade. And the legislative battle is still waging at the federal level, as reporter Mark Irons explains.
Supporters of abortion protest around the country, rallying in places like New York and Texas. And back in Washington,
hands off women's reproductive health care.
Democrats critical of the Supreme Court after a leaked document showed conservative justices could soon overturn Roe v. Wade. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi says her party will continue fighting for abortion in the halls of Congress.
As Republicans seek to control and criminalize women's reproductive health freedoms, Democrats are fighting to enshrine Roe v. Wade into law.
But the attempts to pass a pro-abortion bill have come up short. Last week, the Women's Health Protection Act of 2022 failed in the Senate without any support from Republicans. Pro-life groups say the title, focused on women's health, is misleading and describe it another way.
The Abortion on Demand Until Birth Act, because that's really the essence of the bill.
Connor Simmelsberger with the Family Research Council tracks federal legislation impacting unborn children. He calls the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade extreme, but says the Women's Health Protection Act goes much further.
What this bill is designed to do is not just say we want to make abortion legal, but make it that human right, that constitutional right that they claim it is. And if abortion is a right, there can be no conscientious objectors to it.
In contrast to the Women's Health Protection Act, moderate Republican Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski are taking a slightly different approach. They've reintroduced their own abortion bill, the Reproductive Choice Act. They say it simply upholds Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey. Senator Collins writes, unlike some far-left activists, Senator Murkowski and I want the law today to be the law tomorrow. That's why we introduced legislation in February that would enshrine the important Roe and Casey protections into law. The Reproductive Choice Act would ensure religious freedom protections for healthcare providers who object to performing abortion. But overall, Simmelsberger says the Collins-Murkowski bill still favors abortion and would be destructive to pro-life measures passed at the state level.
They're still saying yes to allowing abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy.
With the abortion debate heating up in the U.S., a look around the world shows most countries have limitations. According to the Family Research Council, the U.S. is one of only 6 countries that allows late-term abortion. It joins Canada, Vietnam, South Korea, North Korea, and China. Bills to secure access to abortion are proposed right here in the U.S. Capitol, but when it comes to talk of restricting abortion at some point in a pregnancy, Democrats don't have much to say.
In general, most Americans don't like abortion.
Dr. Michael New, a professor at the Catholic University of America and associate scholar with the pro-life Charlotte Lozier Institute, has been studying abortion data for years. Though he says polls may show public support for the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, evidence suggests people may be uninformed about what the decision actually did.
Roe v. Wade, for all intents and purposes, legalized abortion on demand in all 50 states for all 9 months of pregnancy. That is a policy position that only a small percentage of Americans share.
New says polls prove it when you look at the percentage of public support for late-term abortion.
After the second trimester, it's less than 40%. And if you really want to get down to after the third trimester, it's less than 20%.
And with the Supreme Court poised to potentially overturn Roe and the 2022 midterm elections drawing near, Americans will consider abortion laws when they go to vote. Last week in a statement, President Joe Biden wrote, "Voters need to elect more pro-choice senators this November and return a pro-choice majority to the House."
People support reasonable regulation.
But Kristen Day, executive director of Democrats for Life, says the increasingly extreme abortion views from Democrats in Congress could alienate voters like her, who consider themselves part of the Democratic Party but also favor protections for the unborn.
I would say to Democrats, if you support, reasonable regulation and limitation, please join us, Democrats for Life, in fighting back against this direction that our party has gone.
Day encourages those running for office at all levels to fight for life. She believes it could pay off at the polls.
It could be such a winning issue.
Mark Irons, EWTN News In Depth.
There are many facets of this legislative fight. Ashley McGuire, a fellow at the Catholic Association, and Catherine Lopez, a senior fellow at the National Review Institute, join me now to dig deeper into the implications. Ladies, it's wonderful to have you here with us. Catherine, you recently wrote about finally talking about abortion rather than euphemisms like choice or decision. How significant is this change?
It's huge. For most of my life, we've been hearing people run away from the word abortion. They talk about choice. They talk about women's health care, women's rights. You had Joe Biden kind of accidentally talking about aborting a child right after the leak of the Supreme Court draft. You have people very openly talking about abortion. And even many of your viewers probably saw the footage. I was at that New York City demonstration. They were protesting prayer 2 weeks ago in Lower Manhattan, and there was a woman simulating an abortion with dolls. There's no pretending anymore. And I think that's good. I think that's an opportunity to have an actual discussion about what abortion is.
Absolutely. Ashley, we just heard 2 female Republican senators say the rank and file position of the Democrats goes too far, Murkowski and Collins, even though they support abortion. Is their proposal any better?
Only slightly, in that it preserves religious liberty protections, but ultimately it's another attempt to codify Roe, and it's not really going to go anywhere. That being said, I think it was good to hear sort of more centrist members of Congress plainly stating the fact, which is that the Democrats' abortion bill, which they've now tried to pass twice and failed, is just way too extreme, even for those who consider themselves pro-choice.
And do you think we're seeing a shift in Democrats as well? Is there an opening for bipartisan support of some form of restrictions on abortion?
I think that's yet to be seen. I think right now everybody's in a holding pattern, waiting to see the final decision come out of the Supreme Court, and then a lot of chips are going to fall into place. But the reality is that if the final decision looks like the leaked version, they're not going to have a choice. And this is sort of, I think, going to be a healthy and healing moment for the American people, because finally their elected representatives will have to tether back to where they are, to where the voters are, which is a much more sort of pro laws that protect women, common sense laws that protect the health and safety of women and unborn babies.
Well, then let's talk about women there. Catherine, you've asked for a focus on the welfare of the mother and the child. You see this as the place for common ground. Is that missing in the discussion on Capitol Hill?
Absolutely. The pro-life movement years ago had a phrase, "women deserve better." And that's where we should focus our minds, because consistently Knights of Columbus polling, other polling have shown us that the Democrats and anyone who is pushing expansion of abortion, which is really what they're doing, they're not the mainstream of America. That's extremism. And the more we talk about women and their actual health and their safety and the ability, making it possible for young girls and women to actually be the mothers that they already are. So often, as we know, these women don't have a choice. And so, every celebrity seems to be, talking about how women's rights are about to end with the end of Roe. That's a lie. Let's talk about what's really going on when women wind up in an abortion clinic.
And the different symptoms that get them there. Ashley, then there's a lot of fear around this issue. Yes, definitely because women don't feel like they have options, but also because a lot of people have been talking about the criminalization of women who have miscarriages. It's often used to persuade women of the importance of preserving the right to abortion. Are women who suffer from the loss of a child really at risk of incarceration?
No, that's a great example of the complete histrionic fear-mongering that the pro-abortion, and we can say pro-abortion because they, as Catherine was saying, have stopped pretending like they're for anything but abortion. No, that's just histrionics, and honestly, it's sort of it's condescending to women to think that we're that dumb that we would believe that. And no, I think that Catherine's absolutely right that this is an incredible moment to reshift our focus. I mean, already the pro-life movement has really put a lot of work in the last couple of decades into being a movement that's for the woman and the child, not just protecting the life of the unborn, but for helping women who do choose life to then flourish as mothers. And I think we're going to see a lot of wonderful conversations happening about how we can do that in a concrete way, because let's be honest, we're going to have to really put our feet to the ground in a concrete way in a post-Roe America.
What would that look like, Ashley? What does putting your feet on the ground in a concrete way look like?
Well, I thought when Senator Tim Scott had a little back and forth with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, he gave a great sort of preview of what that looks like. This was when she basically made the case that abortion is good for poor minority communities, and he, as an African-American son of a single mother, said, I'm so glad that I'm standing here, as a counter-indication to that. But he said, I want to challenge you to a real conversation about laws like more funding, expanding the child care tax credit, finding creative ways to help people who are struggling with the expense of child care, expanding early literacy programs, or take a look at the Texas bill, which at the same time that it basically outlawed abortions after a heartbeat can be detected, funneled tens of millions of dollars into pregnancy resource centers that give women an actual choice and let them decide to be the mom that they're capable of becoming.
Let's talk about this decision then. Catherine, if the leaked decision doesn't change, restrictions on abortion would be a state-level decision. Would these proposals on Capitol Hill once again stop the democratic process?
What needs to happen is, first of all, as Ashley said, an end to the histrionics, an end to the lies. There are outright lies like that miscarriage point. Also that women won't get health care if they have other conditions like cancer. No, you can treat a woman's cancer when she's pregnant. This is not ending actual health care. But even more than legislation, as Ashley said, feet to the ground in renewed ways. We need to show the country that we actually love women and will step up to the plate to help them. Do the women in our lives know, the young girls in our lives know that we would help them if they got pregnant in a non-ideal situation? I worry oftentimes that's not the case. They don't know. And this Walking with Moms initiative that the USCCB has, the Catholic bishops, is a really important challenge to all pro-life Catholics to really step up to the plate and see what the resources are in your community and make sure everybody in your church knows this, because abortion doesn't end with the end of Roe. In states like my New York, we're going to have more abortion and become an abortion destination. So it's about more than legislation at the end of Roe.
Well, that's a great call to action, Catherine. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. And we did cover the Walking with Moms segment, and we'll make sure that we put that out on social media as well. Thank you so much, ladies. We continue our discussion about abortion legislation at the state level. We're joined by a bipartisan panel from Louisiana where all of the women state senators are pro-life. Our conversation up next.
And we are celebrating Asian Pacific Heritage Month through these many manifestations of our devotions.
Celebrating Catholicism through different cultures and traditions, we explore the rich fabric of faith that draws us together as one.
There's a lot of parallels between the game of football and faith. To me, football, it's a battle that you prepare for. Every Saturday is a battle in a way, and same thing with the faith. It's a constant battle.
The deep devotion to God that is taking this young man from the gridiron to the seminary, his journey ahead. And images of the week, a walking prayer service in St. Peter's Basilica, stopping at images of the Virgin Mary, all in honor of the Blessed Mother this month of May. EWTN News In Depth is coming right back.
Welcome back to EWTN News In Depth. Louisiana is considered one of the most pro-life states in the country and is one of 13 states with a trigger law that will ban abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. In a rare case of bipartisanship, all 5 women in the Louisiana Senate are pro-life, and they spearhead pro-life legislation that defends the unborn and supports vulnerable women. The 5 senators, Regina Barrow, Heather Cloud, Sharon Hewitt, Katrina Jackson, and Beth Mizell, are adamant in their support for the unborn both in and out of Louisiana's Capitol building. They often appear together at pro-life rallies, including a march with Louisiana Right to Life last week in Baton Rouge. Some of the legislation they're fighting for includes prohibiting the sale of abortion pills without a prescription, increasing criminal penalties for abortion providers under the state's trigger laws, and creating the Office on Women's Health within the Louisiana Department of Health. All women senators present voted in favor of the bills. The bills are now waiting to pass through the State House of Representatives. 3 of these state senators, Democrats Senator Barrow, Senator Jackson, and Republican Senator Mizell, joins us today to discuss their unique bipartisan unity to protect the unborn. It's wonderful to have you here with us. Senator Barrow, the last woman in the Louisiana state legislature to support abortion resigned last month. Do you think there's more room in the future for women in leadership to be pro-life?
Well, absolutely. I believe that there's always a chance. However, from the section of the state that she actually came from, it's a little bit more liberal than what we all represent. So the likelihood may not be, but, everything is possible. Whoever thought that you would have had 5 women serving in the Senate pro-life?
That's right. And Senator Mizell, that bipartisan unity that you have in Louisiana is very unique. What made speaking in one voice possible?
I think that we all come from a very strong faith-based belief place. A lot of our bills are to protect victims, or to protect children, or to offer some solutions that the bureaucracy is kind of overlooked in victims. And it's just natural that we would all want to protect life and protect the unborn, but I can't tell you how I love hearing my colleague's voice on the call. It's great that we're all united with this.
It's beautiful to see women helping women. Senator Jackson, you authored a bill that would criminalize providing abortions. What is significant or different about this bill?
Well, the vast difference is, and very significant, is that Louisiana already has trigger laws. My bill also has a trigger law if and when, I say when because I'm very hopeful, that the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, that immediately abortions in the state of Louisiana will be illegal. And with that, it's my new bill that accompanies that talks about criminalizing those who perform illegal abortions. The difference is in some states you've seen, and even in ours, you've seen legislation offered that would criminalize women. And ours doesn't. The woman that finds herself in a vulnerable position would not be criminalized, but those performing those illegal abortions would be criminalized.
It's a very important point you make about protecting women. Senator Barrow, let's talk about your bill to create the Office on Women's Health. How do you want this office to support pregnant women and mothers?
Well, I am so excited about this bill. I feel like it's been a long time coming. And so I wanted to be able to provide the continuity of services that women need, starting like with the program that we have called the Nurse Partnership. Right now, that part is a great program, but it's kind of fragmented. So I would like to see that brought in, helping women from the day of beginning, helping them being able to navigate through the pregnancy to a healthy delivery, and then helping them throughout the process so that they have a healthy child and a mother in a healthy state.
And do you think that that is a position of leadership, like you're trying to lead the rest of the country in this initiative?
I do. I would hope that many would actually see this as an opportunity of being able to really thread the continuity of care and services for women, because we know at the end of the day, when the mother does well, the child does well. And so this, to me, is the launching pad of ensuring that they are receiving the services that they need so that they can be extremely healthy.
Senator Mizell, you authored a bill that allows outpatients to bring cell phones into abortion clinics. This is something that's not talked about very often. Why does this matter so much?
It was amazing to me. I would get calls from counselors that would be at the abortion clinic parking lot to counsel with the women that were going in to see if some of their needs could be met, that maybe they would reconsider their decision. And they reached out to me and said, you know, the patients in the abortion clinics can have a phone when they go into the facility. And I couldn't believe that, because it's such a basic expectation of any patient, especially, the abortion clinic patients would be there all day. They're sitting in a waiting room most of the morning until they would be seen in the afternoon. They wouldn't be able to reach out to a loved one, and the loved one couldn't call them. So it's amazing to me that, you know, at a very basic level, this is a right that we would expect every woman to have when they're going through a procedure that is not only medically frightening, but emotionally devastating to a lot of people, that they need that support, whether they're going to do it or not. So,
and that they wouldn't find opportunities to find information to be able to change their minds. Do you think that that had something to do with it?
Absolutely. I think that's why the pro-abortion lobby was against it, because otherwise it just seems like such a benign thing to ask for a patient to be able to have their phone. But there were a lot of really ridiculous excuses on why they shouldn't have their phone. But just like you said, at a basic level, they need to be able to reach out and to receive calls, whether it's a counseling call or a loved one checking on their wellness. So it was important. And it was an interesting conversation this year.
It's definitely unique. Senator Jackson, aside from legislation, what steps are necessary to replicate the unity that you have in Louisiana in other parts of the country?
Well, I think what my colleague said, that we're uniquely unique from some other states in that our legislature is faith-based. But the steps I believe are necessary is what you see happening here. Whether we're Democrat or Republican women, when we come together to fight for life, we fight for life at every stage of life. We are right now with the foresight of President Pro Tem Beth Mizell, secured $1.9 million, I think it was, for funding for sex trafficking victims. And those are the steps that's needed, that we look at the care of children and women and advocate for that at every stage of life. Also, our Senator Barrow chairs the Select Committee on Women in Government. All women of the Senate sit on that committee. That has brought a lot of unity on issues with life, issues with children and women, and what's needed. And so we stand together in that committee, and we hold special committee meetings just to deal with issues affecting women and children. I think that has been one of the most effective committees on unifying us and keeping us together and well informed.
Well, you're definitely leaders for the rest of the country. Senator Barrow, I'm curious about your personal story. You've mentioned that you had discrimination in your decision to keep your child. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, early on, a long time ago, when my husband and I were dating, and I became pregnant before marriage, And that was a very, very tough time for me and for my husband. We were both the oldest of our family. And my dad often tells me how many, what opportunities he had for me. But I actually decided to keep our daughter, which to this day I am so extremely grateful that I did. And as a result of that, my stance in terms of taking a pro-life stance, there were issues that I faced with the party initially, especially in the very beginning, before Senator Jackson joined me. There were, a lot of ugly comments that I received and criticism. So I continue to stand on what I believe, and also just my personal story of how my life would have been changed and redirected had I made, if I had decided to abort my daughter, which I didn't, and now I have a grandson that happens to be Senator Jackson's godson.
That's beautiful to hear that you not only have connections because of your pro-life stance, but also because you're partners in your journey in faith. That's wonderful to hear. Is there anything, a message in particular that you have then for standing tall for young women who want to have a career, want to be leaders just like the three of you are? Any advice for them?
I would say real quickly that God has a purpose for everything that we go through in life. And I can tell you my life journey has helped me to be able to help others. And I have actually spent my time doing that. So whatever God has for you, no man can stop it. And even if you make a mistake, and some people might call that a mistake, it's not a mistake. It's just really preparing you for the next stage of your life.
Senator Jackson, you wanted to give a piece of advice?
Sure. I would just say, number one, keep God first in everything that you do. Number two, never underestimate yourself, even when you find yourself in a situation that you did not believe you will be in. That we have to, as women, have the tenacity and some say the unmitigated gall to think past our what some think are failures and mistakes, and to think to a brighter day. There is a large portion of America who are successful women and who have made mistakes, who have seen trials and tribulations, and they've forged forward. And that's what I would tell people right now. That's what keeps me going. I'm sure that's what keeps my colleagues going in everything that we do. Our lives are not perfect. And get you a mentor. I would say that to every young woman. Get with someone who can mentor you, who will be honest about their life. Even if they're successful now, who doesn't mind sharing what happened and how they got there. That is so very important for young women.
Sharing their journey. Senator Montse, quickly, your piece of advice.
I think let God use you. Use your life experiences to follow where God's taken you, and just stay strong in your belief system, and don't be afraid. You can't be afraid. God's got you in his hand.
Thank you so much. Refreshing food for thought and great leadership. Really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
During the month of May, we express our devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. I'm Montse Alvarado, and I'm here at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in D.C., where we join a pilgrimage to honor Mary, our Blessed Mother. Up next, accompany us in this centuries-old tradition.
The month of May is dedicated to our Blessed Mother. Around the globe, special devotions are celebrated in many different ways. May is also Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Roselle Regis shares with us how the AAPI community fuses together a celebration of its culture and its faith in this Catholic Life report.
It was a gathering of diverse cultures from Asia and the Pacific. Communities from China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Laos, to name a few, venerated Mother Mary with a one-of-a-kind procession, a vibrant parade to celebrate their heritage and various Marian devotions. After the procession was a call to prayer, followed by the crowning of the Blessed Virgin Mary, praying of the rosaries in the different languages, and ending with Holy Mass. The month of May is the month of Mary, where we honor her and deepen our devotion to her. This Marian pilgrimage is extra special because it's also intertwined with another celebration. May is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and this event was put together by the AAPI community.
I'm here representing the Indian Catholic community. My parents have been teaching me like the Our Father prayer and the Hail Mary prayer since I was 3 years old, and they were the reason why being a part of the Catholic faith has been enjoyable throughout my childhood.
It was a very proud moment for Abigail Gerald, being the person to crown the Blessed Virgin Mary during the event.
I feel like it's very important that we venerate Mother Mary for not only saying yes to God, but for like all the sacrifices she's made for us so that Jesus Christ could come into the world and forgive us of our sins.
Abigail is just one of the many Indian Catholics that participated in the Marian pilgrimage. Although there are many challenges facing Catholics in India, President of the Asia-Pacific Catholic Network, Dr. Fred Semendi, says the faith is very much alive in the Indian communities here in the country. In fact, he was happy to see the many Indian communities take part in the pilgrimage from D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and Connecticut.
I am sure they will be very much impressed with the harmony among all the Asian Pacific people, okay, in the religious harmony, how we are all come together and pray to Mary, pray to Jesus.
Dr. Fred Semendi, along with Sister Myrna Tordillo from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, coordinate this annual Marian pilgrimage every year. Sister Myrna Tordillo's mission is to reach out to the Asian and Pacific Island Catholics nationwide throughout the many dioceses and organizations, not only to cultivate the faith among the various communities, but also looking at how U.S. bishops can address the challenge each community is facing in living out the faith. Sister Myrna, who is Filipino, shares the story of Our Lady of Peace and Good Voyage, known as the Virgin of Antipolo.
Our Lady of Antipolo is somebody that we can relate to because it's about a journey. And people who have migrated, who are in the diaspora, who are here, can relate to Our Lady and ask for her intercession and thank the Lord of the gift of their faith that is being brought here.
In the Vietnamese Catholic community, they pay devotion to Our Lady of Lavang. Marie Rose Huang explains that a Marian apparition took place in a poor farming village in central Vietnam, at a time where Catholics were persecuted and killed.
The lady appeared to them and told them, and of course they were hungry and sick and everything, so the lady appeared to them and said that, okay, you can take this plant and just boil them, and it will cure you of all the illness and everything. So that's the reason why we call it lavang. Lavang is actually the name of a plant.
That tea supposedly kept the Catholic faithfuls in Vietnam healthy despite famine and was able to escape persecution. Carolyn Ng from Our Lady of China Pastoral Mission knows all too well about the restrictions of religious freedom in China. Often working with the youth ministry at her parish, she tells the younger generation to be grateful of the freedoms they enjoy here in the U.S.
What's happening in China, I always use it to share with our children when they have a choice to not go to church. I say, well, other children may not have the choice. The message is like, wow, in America, why are we not paying attention, when other parts of the world do not have that kind of freedom, freedom to worship, freedom to raise a family.
Dian Arifin from the Indonesian Catholic community shares a similar story of being a part of a minority religion. Born and raised in Indonesia to Catholic parents, she recalls finding a place to praise and worship God in her motherland very difficult. Nevertheless, she says the faith perseveres.
I believe that many of my fellow Indonesian Catholics, even though we are minorities, we have experienced God's graces, God's help, God's guidance and protection in our life. That's why, regardless of our small number, we believe in God and we celebrate our faith.
Voices like Abigail, Marie Rose, Carolyn, and Dian all come from different cultures, different countries with different traditions. But no matter what the circumstance, they keep their faith strong in their lives and in their hearts. Roselle Regis, EWTN News in Depth.
With our focus on Asia, we turn our attention to the second most populated country in both Asia and the world, India. Some 20 million of the nearly 1.5 billion citizens call themselves Catholic. That's just 2% of the entire country. And as Roselle just reported, they face many religious liberty challenges. John Prabudos, the chairman of the Federation of Indian American Christian Organizations, joins me now to discuss. John, thank you for being with us. India has been designated a country of particular concern by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom for a third year in a row. That means the government has engaged in or tolerated particularly severe violations of religious freedom, including government restrictions and social hostility. Can you give some more specific examples of these violations?
The violations are very specific to religious minorities, basically the Abrahamic faith. They see them as an outsiders, and there's a Hindu nationalist movement have been sweeping the country in the last 15, 20 years or so. Now it has come to a very dangerous tipping point. I would consider that India has gone to a point of no return at this stage. Wow. But we have, even though a smaller percentage officially are Christians, practically speaking, there's more than 100 million people that follow Christian faith in one form or the other in India. In a non-denominational way or an unorganized church? Yes, all included. You will say about 100 million or so, and they are all facing a life-threatening situation because of the political movement. And if you see what has happened in Sri Lanka, and that's the what happened in Sri Lanka 10, 15 years ago is what's happening in India now. Tell us a little bit more about the Sri Lanka issue. The Sri Lanka issue was mostly an ethnic conflict dominated by the Buddhist militant political nationalism. And in India, it is being the Hindu militant nationalism, Hindu nationalism. Now, when we think about Hinduism, we don't think about militants. We think of yoga, we think peaceful. Of vegetarian food and things like that. But there is a very violent segment within the Hindu faith that goes political nationalism, that say there's the land of India, from Pakistan all the way to Sri Lanka and to Burma, is a land only for the Hindus. And then interestingly enough, this organization that started 120 some years ago was modeled after Himmler's organization, the SS. They called it in India the RSS, and they are in power today. That's significant and I think concerning. What has been the international response then to the religious persecution in India that you describe? And what are the changes you think the international community needs to make? Now, unfortunately, the leadership, the governmental, international government leaders, elected officials in various governments, wanting to sell their products to India. And India has plenty to buy because the manufacturing for the last few years, for several decades, have been lagging behind China and other countries. And so India has a huge market. Now, U.S. wants to sell arms, like Secretary Blinken the other day said, with the Indian foreign minister in Washington, basically said, well, we are very concerned about everything that's happening in India, but we want to do this with you. We want to sell these arms to you. That's troubling because that happened. This is not the first time that has happened in the history. This has happened in Central Europe in the 40s, in the 30s, 1930s and 40s, and that's happening, repeating itself in India. Interestingly enough, though, there is an organization called Genocide Watch in Washington, headed by a professor in George Mason University, and he has predicted that India is the second most likeliest place to have a large-scale genocide within the next 5 to 10 years. Now, he was right on 2 times in the last 2 decades, one in Rwanda, the second time in Bosnia. He was right on the point in the timeline. And now he says India is ready for it. And so would you agree that what the State Department has done in making it a country of particular concern just isn't enough? No, that is a very technical point. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom for the 3rd consecutive year has recommended India to be a country of particular concern, but the State Department is stalling it. They don't want to, because once you accept that recommendation, then a set of sanctions could be levied against. It's not that they will be, but could be levied against the country.
So it's a step in the right direction.
Because of that, the State Department is stonewalling all the efforts, and we are putting pressure, and members of Congress and other agencies are putting pressure to see that the State Department finally see the light.
One last quick question. The Catholic Church is the single largest Christian church in India, but it's still a very small percentage of the overall population. What's most significant about this community, and is there anything that the Catholic Church is doing to be a leader to combat this discrimination?
For the Hindu nationalists, they don't differentiate between the Catholics and the Protestant and the other denominations. But having said that, they, as you may remember, that last Christmas gift to the Mother Teresa of Calcutta, her organization, the Missionaries of Charity, its ability to receive donations from donors outside of India was taken away. Mm-hmm. And that was an assault. That shows the kind of animosity this ruling dispensation in India has towards anything that is Christian. And that Washington needs to see, because in the long-term interest of the United States, that we wake up now. Otherwise, we're going to see ourselves like what's happening in Sri Lanka, and it will be too late.
That's right.
The devastation will be several times more than what you see in Sri Lanka today.
It's a long-term interest in religious freedom as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Ahead, news about the Buffalo shooting and Ukraine. Plus, a Russian soldier asks a Ukrainian widow for forgiveness. The Week in Review is next. And marching in honor of our Blessed Mother, the annual event that draws service members from around the globe. A personal take from one of our EWTN News In Depth team members. We'll be right back. Funerals have begun for victims in the grocery store shooting in Buffalo, New York. The latest about the store massacre top the Week in Review. On Thursday, the suspect appeared in court. He's accused of killing 10 people and wounding 3 more in a racially motivated mass shooting. A grand jury has indicted the 18-year-old on a first-degree murder charge to which he has pleaded not guilty. He's accused of opening fire with legally purchased weapons in the Tops Friendly Market, a well-known grocery store in a predominantly black Buffalo neighborhood. Before the attack, he posted hundreds of pages of writings which detailed his hatred of minorities. The suspect live-streamed last weekend's massacre from a helmet camera before surrendering to police. The Tops store was the only grocery store for miles and also served as a community gathering landmark.
Someone had the unmitigated gall, the audacity to come to our community, our home, and to rob us of our loved ones, and then to rob us of our only grocery store. This Tops was our food source, our source to healthy foods, our source to foods with valuable nutrition, and now it's been taken from us. That's how we know this was a hate crime. Not only did he target black folks, he targeted our ability to get healthy foods.
On Tuesday, President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visited the site of the shooting in Buffalo to pay their respects before meeting with the victims' families and first responders. Calling the mass shooting domestic terrorism, the president denounced what he called the poison of white supremacy. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued a statement in response to the shooting in Buffalo, writing, "The bishops again call for an honest dialogue rooted in Christ in addressing the persistent evil of racism in our country. The Catholic Church has been a consistent voice for rational yet effective reforms of regulation of dangerous weapons." Important developments late this week on Capitol Hill in support of Ukraine. The Senate overwhelmingly approved $40 billion in military and economic aid as both parties rallied against Russia's invasion. The 86-11 vote gave final congressional approval to the package, which was delayed by a week by one senator's objection. It comes as U.S. aid to Ukraine threatened to run dry this week. The U.S. Embassy has reopened in Kyiv a month after the Russians abandoned their bid to seize the Ukrainian capital and 3 months after it was closed. Diplomats have now returned there on a permanent basis. And on Wednesday, the Senate unanimously confirmed a new U.S. ambassador to Ukraine in an expedited confirmation process. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle emphasized the importance of having a top U.S. diplomat in country. Historic developments were on display on Thursday when the president welcomed the leaders of Sweden and Finland to the White House. Both countries, long militarily neutral, have now officially applied to join NATO, a move analysts say will transform Europe's security landscape for years to come.
Today, I'm proud to welcome and offer the strong support of the United States for the applications of two great democracies and two close, highly capable partners to join the strongest, most powerful defensive alliance in the history of the world.
Today, the situation in Ukraine reminds us of the darkest days of European history. And I must say that during dark times, it is great to be among close friends.
Prime Minister Anderson said despite 200 years of military non-alignment, Russia's aggression against a sovereign and democratic neighbor was a watershed moment for Sweden, leading to widespread public support in her country for this historic change. Ukraine's top military general told his NATO counterparts this week his troops are now successfully conducting counterattacks against the Russians. This despite the surrender of a now famous group of Ukrainian soldiers. Russia now controls the city of Mariupol after more than 1,000 Ukrainian troops holed up at that giant steel plant They laid down their weapons as Ukraine formally declared to end its combat mission there. Dozens of those who surrendered were injured and are now being treated at hospitals in the Ukrainian region controlled by Russia. Ukrainian officials say they expect the evacuated soldiers to eventually be exchanged in prisoner of war swaps. But some Russian officials have cast doubt on that possibility, and delicate negotiations are ongoing. The Russian soldier accused of shooting an unarmed Ukrainian man in the head during the first days of the war pleaded guilty on Wednesday in the first war crimes trial since the invasion. Prosecutors are calling for a life sentence. In court, he asked the man's widow for forgiveness. She told the court she would not object if the 21-year-old Russian is exchanged as part of a prisoner swap for those Ukrainian soldiers captured from the Mariupol steel plant. One of the largest military events in France, the International Military Pilgrimage to Lourdes, wrapped up last weekend. It brings together tens of thousands of brothers and sisters in arms. EWTN News In Depth sent a news crew and will be bringing you the personal stories of wounded veterans who took part in the pilgrimage through a special program with the Knights of Columbus called Warriors to Lourdes. That report from our Colin Flynn in the weeks ahead. But first, In-Depth producer Elizabeth Jones was also there and shares her personal impressions of this special pilgrimage.
Picturesque and peaceful, the Basilica in Lourdes looks like something out of a fairy tale, a great castle sitting high above the grotto of healing waters. The juxtaposition of the grandeur of the Basilica next to the plainness and humbleness of the grotto isn't lost on me. Throughout the week, one theme kept jumping out at me, the seeming contradiction of Christians living in this world, but not being of this world. A similar paradox is found in this military pilgrimage, with service members from dozens of nations marching through the streets of this small Marian village. Parades of military bands fill the air with music. They draw cheers and salutes for all of their pomp and circumstance. But these armed forces, who represent strength, leadership, and courage, are all humbled before the gentleness, simplicity, and obedience of our Blessed Mother. I was inspired to see those who provide protection for their countries seek protection and aid from our tender Mother, and exchange their marching music the singing rosary. It was an incredible scene. These warriors from many nations came together under one God, one Catholic faith, in a stunning candlelight Marian procession throughout the grounds of the Basilica, a massive show of strength, of their love for God and our Holy Mother. Those big moments contrasted with personal, quiet moments of soldiers, veterans, and their families brought to their knees at the feet of Our Lady in hopes that she will wrap them in her mantle. Elizabeth Jones, EWTN News in Depth.
Next month, Colin Flynn has the stories of hope from those who took part in the Warriors to Lourdes program hosted by the Knights of Columbus. He will also dive into what is called moral injury, this little-known psychological wound that professionals are now learning how to diagnose and help treat.
It's a story of sports, family, and faith. Coming up next, learn about a college athlete's road to discerning the priesthood.
Trading in his football helmet for a priest's collar, right after this. Vocations to the priesthood come from many different walks of life. At Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas, a successful football player has decided he's moving his classroom studies to the seminary. Reporter Alan Holdren brings us this week's Faith Journey in Depth.
As an athlete, it's easy to put your identity in the fact that you are an athlete. It's been helpful for me to know that, I put my identity in the fact that I'm a son of God. And that's where my identity and my worth comes from, and that alone. There's a lot of parallels between the game of football and faith. To me, football, it's a battle that you prepare for. Every Saturday is a battle in a way, and same thing with the faith. It's a constant battle. It's you versus the enemy, and it's one that you always need to be preparing for and always working for.
From catching Hail Marys to praying them, Kansas State University wide receiver Landry Weber is discerning a vocation to the priesthood.
Kind of went on a journey from, God, I think I'm okay, I don't really have any interest in this, to okay, maybe I'll be a little bit open to it, to actually desiring it, being excited about it, seeing myself being happy, and ultimately really looking forward to living that life.
Kansas State athletics run in Landry's family. His sister Mackenzie played volleyball for the school. His brother Stanton, also number 12, played wide receiver on the football team before him. Their mom, Nancy, was a cheerleader. Their dad, Stan, is a former K-State quarterback and current K-State Sports Network commentator. A strong Catholic faith also runs in the family.
I always thought he was interested in things such as the lives of the saints, and I remember taking him to a Divine Mercy Chapel when he was a little bit older, teenager, and he really liked that. And so he was always very interested. So I wasn't surprised when he told me he was experiencing the calling.
And everything that happens in life, everyone's adventure is different, but it's going to end, and it's a very short period of time compared to eternity. So what they do with their soul and how they live their life of faith is the most important thing. And it also happens to be the best course of action to be able to be calm and fight through life's challenges.
It's fitting that the Weber family would also receive spiritual nourishment right here on the K-State University campus at St. Isidore's Catholic Student Center. Father Gail Hammerschmidt leads this growing ministry that's undergoing a $14 million facelift.
Christ have mercy. The biggest thing we're trying to achieve here is where people can encounter real friendship, true friendship, and obviously an encounter with the living God. They can grow deeper in their faith and come to know the love that He has for them and the mission that He desires to send them on. Landry is a beautiful example of this, which we are trying to do. He's a young man that has come here, has found a relationship with the living God, and is now going to spend his life in one way or another telling people of the goodness of our resurrected Lord. Iniquities and cleanse me from...
It's all had its influence. And after receiving his master's degree last weekend in accounting, Landry plans to study for the Archdiocese of Kansas City, starting this fall.
I am extremely at peace in this decision, and more at peace than I ever thought I would be. And it was hard to walk away from the game, and I thought it would be really hard to come back, to see my teammates, to see practice, and it's been way easier than I ever would thought, and it has nothing to do with me. It has all to do with God sharing the graces with me to have that strength, because I feel, when you take a leap of faith for Him, He takes care of you.
In Manhattan, Kansas, Alan Holdren for EWTN News In Depth.
Our prayers are with Landry as he starts his seminary studies. His faith is truly an inspiration. As we celebrate the Virgin Mary throughout the month of May, we share with you a glimpse of the devotions and celebrations of her from around the world. We take you to Rome and Poland in our Images of the Week. The Vatican hosts 2 weekly occasions for prayer in honor of Mary this month. On Wednesdays, a procession begins at the portico of St. Peter's Basilica and then proceeds to Michelangelo's Pietà. Candles and incense are used during the walking prayer service throughout the basilica. And the faithful make their way to the various altars with magnificent images of our Blessed Mother. On Saturdays throughout the month, the Vatican holds a candlelight rosary procession around St. Peter's Square. A reproduction of the image of Mary under her title Mater Ecclesia, which means Mother of the Church, is present during the rosary. It's led by Cardinal Angelo Comastri. And in Zakopane, Poland, traditional garb is worn as Catholics hold a procession at the shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. More than 2,000 people strong, they carry statues of our Blessed Mother throughout the town and up the shrine while saying the rosary. Men wave Polish and Vatican flags while on horseback, and bands play music in honor of her. The Polish built the national shrine to Our Lady of Fatima there in gratitude for our Blessed Mother saving Pope St. John Paul II during the assassination attempt in 1981. We have more beautiful photos from both the Rome and Poland events. You can see our full photo albums from these events on Facebook at EWTN News In Depth. And that's it for us. We're off next week. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and then we're back planning a special program for you to air June 3rd and 5th. More from reporting of Life After Roe debate in the States. I'm Montse Alvarado. We hope to see you then.